Welcome back, viewers. This is Literary Goa again, and we have with us authors who have written books relating to Goa, from Goa, the diaspora, and things like that. Today we have with us Marianne Furtado de Nazareth. Marianne, your connections are with Pilen and Bangalore, right?
That's right.
How Bangalore?
Bangalore because my grandfather, Hipólito João Furtado, moved from Goa from Pilen and went away to Nairobi, where he looked for his fortune. I think in those days that's where they made their money. And
Which years?
This was in the early 30s.
Yeah.
Or probably even a little earlier than that. And he met my grandmom there and married her, a Goan. And then they came back, and instead of settling in Goa, they decided to settle in Bangalore because the weather is very similar.
Bangalore also is a big place for English education.
That's right. He was very keen on having his family in Bangalore, and then of course he had come back with a fortune, so he wanted to be comfortable, I guess.
And he himself studied in the English schools in Bardes or where?
I'm not very sure about that, but I know he did his accountancy and his basic education was done here in Goa before he decided to go to Nairobi, and then he did whatever further studies there.
Because a lot of people from this Bardes belt who migrated to the English speaking world actually studied in schools like Arpora, Saligaon, Parra,
Okay.
in that sense. But anyway, you have been a journalist, you've been in advertising, you've been an author,
Yes.
many roles, and also a professor.
Yes.
Tell us how it evolved.
Well, I've been wearing many hats for a long time. I started off with the ad agency, basically family run along with my husband, and we ran it for about 12 years. It did really well, and but towards the end I was becoming creative to try and get my money rather than creative ads. So then I thought, okay, let's just close that down and let me get on and get a job full time. Meanwhile, writing has always been a great love of mine, my first love. So I was hired by the Deccan Herald because I used to freelance.
Major newspaper in Bangalore.
Yes, because I used to freelance for several years before that. So I went in there and I worked there for 2 years with the Deccan Herald.
As an assistant editor?
I first started as chief sub.
Okay.
And then I landed this fantastic fellowship which took me to Europe. And I studied in Europe starting in Denmark.
I see.
In Aarhus, that is a university town south of Copenhagen. And then I moved to Amsterdam for 6 months. And then from there I went to the UK in Wales, where I did a year.
I see.
So I did a 2-year master's in journalism.
I see.
After which I came back, and the Deccan Herald was so pleased for me to come back there because, you get yourself a foreign degree, you normally look for greener pastures. But I guess I'm just a bit loyal, and I went back. And they gave me assistant editorship.
I see. Looking after?
The edit and the op-ed pages.
I see.
Yes.
I see.
It was very, very high responsibility, but
the pages were very, very well done because...
Very well done. They had designers who came in from Switzerland and all over and taught us how it had to be done. And then I enjoyed doing my work with them, but it curtailed my writing. And that is when I decided, let me just get out of there, and I went off and did my PhD.
I see. In what topic?
In journalism.
I see. What topic is it?
I did, that's when the interest had grown on conservation of species.
I see.
And science and the environment. So my topic, my dissertation was man and elephant conflict and how the media covers it.
In Karnataka you have a lot of that, no?
We have a lot of it in South India,
South India.
Huge. And so I covered 2 newspapers, that is the Times of India and the Hindu,
I see.
and I analyzed the 2 newspapers. as for my dissertation, which was really interesting. And after I finished my PhD, I decided it was along with my PhD, I was working in this college. But now I was asked by Mount Carmel's all of a sudden to come and teach their girls.
I see.
And it's been a very exciting and very interesting, session because I'm teaching non-journalists. I'm teaching science students. I'm teaching economic students and those who are doing commerce and students who've never had exposure to journalism ever.
So they feel that these students also need access to media literacy or...
Yes, they felt, because these kids wanted to know more about journalism, especially since there's so much being talked about, about the environment today and all about climate change, and with Greta, the little 16-year-old who has come out talking about it. They are very, very pro the environment today. And so they wanted to know a lot more. What do you do with wet waste composting? How do you do solar energy?
I see.
All those various topics. What is renewable energy? What is sustainable living? That is where I moved into.
So in a word, what you're saying is that in this field you really need to reinvent yourself.
All the time. Constantly, and look for a niche rather than just reportage. Because I find if you look for a niche, the whole world is your oyster. You can be writing for anybody across today with the internet, anyone will hire you. So for at least 12 to 15 years, I traveled with the UNFCCC as their fellow, with UNEP as their fellow to Nairobi. I went back to my grandfather's stomping grounds, and with UN Water, with many UN arms, focusing on the environment and science and the environment. That's what I did.
Shifting gears a bit to your books.
Yes.
Of course, the most colorful one and the one I like the most is Above the Rice Fields of Pilen.
Yes.
And since I'm more or less from that area, I know your house. It's something very typical. You'd like to tell us about this book?
Yes. So I was never really into wanting to write a book. And then my dad said, how can you not want to write a book? You should. I can see how you write, and why don't you get down to it? So this book took me 10 years to write.
Your first? No.
Yes, my first. I never had the heart really to write it because my kids were growing at that time. The boys were growing. But I could see Dad's love for Pilen, and he, of course, has put that into me now. But I decided, okay, let me just do the novel and let me give it a try. Who knows? Maybe a publisher will take it. And I was so surprised, the very first publisher, who was Lead Start, grabbed it.
I see.
And what was so nice was that I was here in Pilen, we were here in Pilen, and she sent me this message saying, I'm sending you the contract, we like your manuscript. And I was so thrilled, it was my first book.
I see.
So I sent her photos of the book.
Okay.
And I sent her, of the house, and I sent her photos of the church.
Pilen Church.
Yes, of the St. John the Baptist. And I sent her photos of the fields around the house.
And they got the artist to...
Yes, and I was so thrilled, they never told me.
I see.
And they got the artist to do this.
Better than the real thing. I mean, of course.
And they got everything in it, with the teak trees, the color of the house.
I see. They got it correct, no?
Absolutely correct, with the little, porch. It's not a big rich man's house. It's not.
But it's typically Goan, and it has that charm, and it's got that old world charm also to it, no?
Yes.
You said 300 years old?
Yes, it's now even that. What happened was the lower part of the house is what could be the agriculturalists. That's my great grandfather had built.
I see.
So that was more very simple house, okay, with a, I know when we were kids there was cow dung floors and
that was there
very,
in all cases, most cases in the 60s and 70s, no?
Yes.
60s.
And the bathroom was outside and we were terrified of that with the snakes and that sort of thing.
And the walls were probably made of lime and lime and mud.
Maybe, yes.
I don't know, whatever.
Yes, and then when my grandpa went to Nairobi, he made his money and he came back and he built the top portion.
Okay.
So that's why, and he built a chapel opposite.
I see.
So you've seen the chapel and this is it.
On the road leading away from the Pilen Church. No?
Yes.
Pilen Church going into the Vado, which is
it's called Furtado.
Furtado.
That's where all the Furtados came from. So this is exactly opposite that. And so I wrote this book and sadly it was published after my father passed away. Very sad.
Which year?
This was published in 2005, I think.
See.
But Dad passed away in 2003, and I think maybe that was what was the incentive. Finish it.
I see.
And so this was, and it was very warmly welcomed. The Goan diaspora across the world, put it out on their Facebook sites, and it's been doing quite well. I mean, it's into its second round of this is the first book. And then, of course, I did a couple of others.
Which are they? Can you just introduce us to them?
The second book which I did was a couple of years later. This was a selection of 12 stories I had written about when I was in the Deccan Herald.
Nicely illustrated.
Very nice. It was done by one of the artists in the office.
I see.
And it was called The One-Eyed Ogre and Other Stories.
I see.
And it's totally sold out. The kids just love it. And this I got self-published because you can't publish stories which are already published.
Okay.
So the Deccan Herald had already published these 12 stories.
I see. In their children's pages?
Yes, in Open Sesame.
I see, Open Sesame.
Open Sesame is their
children's section.
Yes, their children's section. And it really did well. I probably have only 4 or 5 books left of this.
When your kids are young, then you feel like writing for children, and
yes,
that's an age.
And that's when I started. Subsequent to that, I did this one because, you evolve with what's happening in your life as a writer.
True.
So both my parents, sadly, had Parkinson's.
Oh.
Very bad.
I see.
And so I thought, as carers, we can write a novel, and put in a lot of research. So that's where my PhD came in, with all the research about Parkinson's.
I see.
This book was published now in towards the end of March, beginning of April of 2019.
I see.
Again, lead start.
Okay.
And I've been interviewed by a lot of places because Parkinson's is something that is touching almost every family today. And so this is a book which is really has sold a lot of copies. For my launch, I had a huge crowd. People were very excited to have this book, because it's written in like a novel. It's about 2 little girls and how they grow up with these strong, caring parents, and how these parents slowly. So it is all about us, my sister and me and my parents, but I've not used our names. I've not used our names, and I've written only about 2 children across the whole story. This has done really well as well. But now I've taken to writing for my granddaughter.
How big is she?
When she got this book, she was 5.
I see.
Okay, and she...
So a book specially written for her, wow.
For Christmas.
Quite
yes,
something.
Especially, she was thrilled because, it was all about, it was a true story about how she would go out into the garden and, wouldn't want to weed and wouldn't want to take out the dandelions. And it's Andrea and the dandelions.
Her name is Andrea?
No, her name is Elena.
Okay.
But
just like a small fictional license. That
because I didn't see. I was going to leave it as commercial as well to sell it, but I couldn't keep her names in, not for any reason.
Yeah.
She wouldn't have minded, but I preferred not
Yeah,
to.
yeah.
And the whole story is about how she came out into the garden and how she was, putting on her gumboots.
I see.
And how she came out into the garden with her dad was with the lawnmower, and she refused to pull out the dandelions, and she wanted to blow the seeds, the dandelion seeds. And her dad said, "No, don't, Andrea." And she said, "Why not?" And then he said, "Because you'll make 100 more dandelion weeds." And then it struck her, why her dad didn't want her to, blow the seeds.
Yeah.
And so he taught her to throw them all into a bucket and put them on a whole heap where they would just, compost them. And then she kind of understood, because she really is very fond of her dad. So it took, actually, I can write these stories fast, but to get an illustrator.
I see.
And I want Yatish. I like his work.
Very nice,
you can
very
see
nice.
his work.
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
beautiful. And he takes time. He's very expensive. That does look like my son.
I see. I see.
That does look like Andrew. He's a cardiologist in Tennessee.
I see.
But has taken up gardening a lot and enjoys gardening because of the family and what he learned with his grandpa. So yes, like I said, this is written specially for my granddaughter, Elena, but it's in memory of my grandmother who used to tell us stories.
I see.
So
this habit of storytelling runs in the family?
Yes, it does.
It does.
We used to sit out in the backyard with my grandmom, and every night, and she would tell us stories in the light of the big moon. But we used to go to Baroda. They were based in Baroda.
Goa and Goans do have a tradition of storytelling,
Yes.
but it seems to be fading out now. Would that be right? I don't know.
You know what? The thing is that parents don't have the time. But I have found that, I go to various schools to talk about stories and writing. And I just did a whole round of daycare centers in Bangalore called Clay. And it's a preschool and a daycare center. And I explained to parents that if you don't read, how do you expect the little ones to learn to read?
True.
So they sit, and I've explained, pick up stories, which have large pictures. If you have large pictures, the child gets interested. And see, it's just like very little text with a huge picture.
Right.
So I've told young parents, you have to find the time. If you don't, you can't expect. And today's kids have, so much competition.
True.
So it really helps. And, take them to buy books which they want. That luckily my parents did.
And Bangalore's been this lovely place with a
Yes.
lot of libraries, a lot of bookshops.
Yes.
My favorite used to be Select Bookshop, run by the Select
Yes.
aeronautical engineer,
Yes.
where you could buy so cheap second-hand books.
Correct.
Sapna is there, and now Blossom with 3 floors of second-hand
Bookworm.
books.
Yes,
Bookworm.
lots. Gangaram's was there. There are so many bookshops. Now what has happened is that if you finish reading a book,
Yeah.
and you're done with it and you have no space,
Yeah.
you can give it back and he'll give you another
Half the
book for
price.
50%.
50%. Another book.
Yes.
There is a story also that Bangalore probably benefited from all these, returning Brits going back after World War II, after independence.
Correct.
And selling away their libraries, and that's how some of these second-hand bookshops started. I think it's so important,
It is. And many of those books, strangely, are, yes, first editions which they just gave away for little or nothing. But what I have found is for the last 9 years I'm running a little book club.
Called?
It was, when I first started, I called it Eyebrows, and it was run in the Catholic Club in Bangalore, big. Really, I had really big names, including Wendell Rodericks came there and his book called Posque. And I also had quite a number of various authors who came in, even from the UK. And the book club really did well. Now I've changed the whole format. we are just about 30 of us who discuss what we read.
I see.
Rather than having an author,
I see.
we discuss what we have read because
Interesting,
we are
interesting.
all deep readers.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And you share that knowledge, and everyone goes home with so much more knowledge at
Yes,
the end of the
and
day.
we also share books.
I see.
So the last person...
Very interesting.
Yes. The last person who came, she spoke about... She does only translations.
Ah.
And she does translations from Marathi, from English, from Marathi to English. So that would be marvelous, you know, if there was anyone who would do
We have
Konkani to English.
Yeah, we have a book club in Goa, but it's been a bit stagnant, and our model has been to get an author to talk about his or her book.
Okay.
So I think your model is very interesting, where you talk about what you've been reading and share books, and you know.
Yes, because what happens is, if people speak, I have found that
There's
rather
more
than
participation.
yes, when there is more participation, people are very interested.
Yeah.
When it's just one-on-one, when it's just top-down,
Why should we listen? Like?
nobody's interested. They get bored. Whereas this interaction where they hear their own voices, I have found is brilliant and really does well.
Marianne, when you were getting ready for the interview, your husband and your son mentioned that you've also been related to Joseph Furtado, the poet, Joseph
Yes.
and Philip Furtado.
Yes.
Now, these are very big names in Goa, and they've done amazing work and appreciated in different parts of the world, forgotten in their own home perhaps today.
Yes.
Tell
yes.
us a little bit about what
Well,
you know.
to be honest, I just only have memories of what my father told
I
me. And I do have a first edition of Joseph Furtado's poems, which
Songs
was
in Exile?
Yes, which was signed by him
I see.
and given to my grandfather, and my mom gave that to me, so I have it.
I see.
And I know Dad and Mom always told me that he was, you know, a man before his time. People in the village were unhappy with his, you know, idiosyncrasies, and he's quite a bit strange,
Yeah.
you know. And but today they're using him as text.
Yeah, and what is powerful about him is that he wrote in an Indo-Anglian style,
That's right.
using Indian sounds, Hindi words.
Yes.
Before it became fashionable, and before anyone else probably experimented with it.
Correct.
In that
And
sense.
while I was in the Deccan Herald, I did do a story on him, I remember.
I see.
But I do know that there's a really good story done by a researcher from the UK. And, you know, there is talk where he talked about this man's work.
I see.
And which is now become fashionable to have in your texts for school children. So if I think Philip is in the UK, his family.
I see.
Are in the UK, and sadly we were just discussing it this morning, both the houses have fallen.
My goodness.
Both the houses are just overgrown with weeds.
Goa has that problem where we
Very
can't keep in
sad.
touch with our diaspora, and the diaspora, you know, finds it tough when they come back and maintaining it.
So it's diagonally opposite our house
Okay.
in Pilan, but we've just lost out on it.
Anyway, you know, just before we wind up, could you give a word of advice to young people who might want to enter this field, writing? You've gained so much from it, you've given back so much to it. What's your advice to the young people?
I always tell youngsters that just follow your dream. If you enjoy writing, just write. There is no good way or bad way. You can just enjoy whatever you write, and then you could talk to somebody, I mean someone senior. I have a lot of the kids in college come and say, "Ma'am, have a look at my writing. Do you think it's worth it?" And it's a genre which I've never heard of. It's magic, or some magical genre which they write in today, which is huge selling. So why not? I mean, we can always change genres today, and there are publishers who are willing to grab stuff from youngsters today, because youngsters write in a tone which is different from the old Brit style. That's what I feel. So just write, and you never know, you may be the next hot, you know, J.K. Rowling in India.
Thank you so much, Marianne, for spending your time coming here and sharing your knowledge and your work with us. We really appreciate and hope that you'll keep in touch with Goa. Of course, you've always been doing it. I've got a copy of this book that you sent me ages back. So I hope that more of our viewers get to know of your work and also appreciate it for what it's worth. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.